Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. It was a Wednesday evening, one of those long days at work that seemed to stretch endlessly, like the minutes themselves didn't want to pass. I was closing up the small bakery section where I'd worked for the past 5 years. My hands smelled faintly of cinnamon and warm bread, and my apron carried the stories of the day, a bit of flour here, a streak of chocolate there. I was ready to head home, pour myself a cup of tea, and watch something that didn't ask too much from my tired mind. That's when I heard his voice behind me, calm, steady, the kind of tone that didn't demand attention but quietly earned it. "You're still here," he said. It was Michael, our head chef. I turned around, trying not to look as exhausted as I felt. Yes, I laughed softly. The bread decided to rise slower than usual today. He smiled, and I noticed, for the first time in a while, how kind his eyes looked when the kitchen lights reflected in them. "You've worked too much this week," he said, leaning slightly against the counter. "You deserve a break. Why don't you let me make it up to you? Come have dinner with me tomorrow evening. My treat." At first, I thought he was joking. He'd never invited anyone from work out before, at least not that I'd heard. He wasn't the kind of man who mixed work with personal moments. He was all about precision, timing, taste in food and, it seemed, in everything else, but he was serious. I hesitated, searching his face for hidden meaning. Maybe it was just a gesture of gratitude, a chef taking his baker to dinner as thanks. But the way his words lingered in the air felt different. Not romantic exactly, just gentle. Human. So I said yes. The next evening, I stood in front of a small Italian restaurant on the quieter side of town. The kind of place you'd miss if you didn't know to look for it, tucked between an old bookstore and a flower shop that always smelled like roses and rain. The sign read Giovanni's, the letters fading just enough to tell you it had been there for decades. Michael was already there, standing by the door, dressed in something casual yet impossibly neat, a dark jacket, open collar, no trace of his chef's uniform. He smiled when he saw me, that same calm smile that always made people trust him. "You made it," he said. "I did," I replied, though my voice came out softer than I intended. The waiter led us to a corner table near the window. The restaurant glowed with warm light, soft, golden, like melted butter over candle flames. The hum of quiet conversation mixed with the sound of silverware and gentle laughter. I could feel the day slowly slipping off my shoulders. We talked, at first about work, the kitchen, recipes, the endless dance of creating something perfect and never quite getting there. But then, the conversation began to drift. He told me about his early years, how he'd started cooking in his grandmother's tiny kitchen in Maine, where he learned to respect food not for what it could earn him, but for what it could give: comfort, memory, connection. I told him about my daughter, who lived 2 states away now, busy with her own life. I told him how the silence at home had grown louder since she left, how sometimes I'd bake just to fill the air with something warm and alive. He listened. Not the way people usually listen, waiting for their turn to speak, but with genuine presence. Every time I looked up, he was watching me, not intrusively, but like he was trying to understand the person behind my words. Dinner came and went slowly, plates of handmade pasta, wine that tasted like summer berries, and something bittersweet. Time didn't rush us, it simply flowed, carrying us from one story to another. At one point, the lights dimmed a little more, and someone started playing the piano near the back of the room. The melody was simple, almost hesitant, like a thought you whisper before saying it aloud. I caught myself smiling. "It's been a long time since I've had dinner without rushing," I said quietly. He nodded. "It's been a long time since I've had dinner and wanted to stay longer." Something in my chest shifted then, not quite a spark, but a warmth, an old memory of how it felt to be seen not as a coworker, or a mother, or a woman who keeps everything together, but simply as someone worth noticing. When the evening ended, he walked me to my car. The air was cool, carrying the scent of baked bread and city rain. Neither of us hurried to say goodbye. "Thank you for coming," he said finally. "Thank you for asking," I replied. We stood there for a moment, just 2 people in the soft hum of the city night, and I realized that some invitations aren't about the meal or the place, they're about the quiet courage to step out of routine and into something unexpectedly human. I drove home that night with the radio low, my thoughts louder than the music. I wasn't sure what this was or where it would lead, but for the first time in a while, I didn't feel so alone in my own story, and maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something I hadn't even realized I'd been missing. The next few days after that dinner felt strangely calm. Work continued as usual, the same ovens warming up at 6 in the morning, the same smell of yeast rising with the dawn, but something in the air had shifted. It wasn't dramatic or obvious, but quiet, like when you notice that the light through the window falls differently, softer somehow. Michael didn't mention the dinner right away, and neither did I. Yet every time we crossed paths in the kitchen, there was a moment, just a flicker, when our eyes met and stayed a second too long. He'd ask how my morning was going, and I'd ask if the new recipe for lemon tarts worked out, but under those simple words lingered something unspoken. On Friday, he stopped by my station while I was kneading dough. "You're early today," he said, glancing at the tray of pastries cooling beside me. I smiled. "Couldn't sleep. Figured the dough would keep me company." He chuckled softly, wiping his hands on a towel. "That's what I like about you. You treat the kitchen like it's alive." I wasn't sure how to respond, so I just said, "Well, sometimes it feels like the only thing that listens." For a brief second, his face changed, softer, thoughtful, and then he said quietly, "I know that feeling." Later that day, as everyone was packing up, he approached me again. "I'm going to the farmer's market tomorrow morning," he said. "They've got fresh herbs and local honey. You might like it. Want to come along?" It sounded innocent enough, but the invitation made my heart flutter unexpectedly. I told myself it was just another friendly gesture, that he probably asked plenty of people to tag along, but deep down, I knew he hadn't. Saturday morning arrived with crisp air and sunlight that felt new. I wore a simple sweater, tied my hair back, and told myself not to overthink it. When I met him at the market, he was holding 2 cups of coffee, handing one to me with that quiet confidence that always steadied me. "Thought you might need this," he said. "Always," I replied, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. We walked through the rows of vendors, the scent of basil, the sound of people laughing, the clink of coins and the shuffle of feet on old cobblestones. He greeted almost everyone. They knew him there. I watched how easily he connected with people, how his words carried warmth without effort. At T1 stall, an older woman selling herbs smiled knowingly at me. "So this is the woman who makes the pastries he's always talking about," she said. I blinked, surprised. "He talks about my pastries?" Michael grinned, a faint color rising to his cheeks. "Only the good ones," he said. "Which is most of them." We both laughed, but something about that moment stayed with me. I wasn't just his coworker anymore, I was someone he'd mentioned, someone he thought of outside the walls of our kitchen. We spent the morning wandering, tasting, talking. He told me stories about the restaurant's early days, about how hard it was to keep it alive when he first started. I listened, feeling like I was seeing a new side of him, not the chef who gave orders, but the man who carried the weight of dreams quietly. At T1 point, while we stood by a stall filled with sunflowers, he said something that caught me off guard. "You know, I used to think running a restaurant would fill every space in my life. But sometimes, it's not enough. You can create beauty every day, and still feel like something's missing." I looked at him, unsure what to say. "Maybe what's missing isn't in the work," I said after a moment. "Maybe it's in who you share it with." He looked at me, then really looked, and I felt my chest tighten. Not from nervousness, but from recognition. The kind that comes when you realize someone else understands your kind of loneliness. After that, silence wasn't uncomfortable between us anymore. It was easy, like a shared pause between 2 notes of the same song. Before we parted, he handed me a small jar of honey he'd bought from one of the stands. "For your tea," he said. "And maybe for your cinnamon rolls, if you feel like experimenting." I smiled. "I'll save it for something special." That night, I opened the jar and dipped a spoon in, tasting the sweetness that reminded me of sunlight. It wasn't just honey, it was a quiet symbol of something beginning. Not love, not yet, but understanding. I end the days that followed, we continued to move through work as usual, at least on the surface. But behind every shared glance, every unspoken moment in the kitchen, something was quietly growing. It was the kind of connection that didn't rush. It didn't demand. It simply existed, waiting, patient and real, and though I didn't know it yet, that calm would soon give way to a storm I never saw coming, one that would test everything I'd started to feel. It had been almost 3 weeks since that morning at the market, and though neither of us spoke about what was slowly forming between us, It was there in the pauses, in the quiet gestures, in the small things that people often overlook. The way he'd bring me coffee before the shift started. The way I'd save him the first slice of fresh bread from the oven. It was all unspoken, but it said enough. Still, the world around us didn't stop spinning. The restaurant grew busier as the weather cooled. Tourists came in, reservations filled up, and the kitchen became a storm of movement again, clattering pans, shouted orders, the heat of ambition. It was beautiful, but exhausting. One late evening, after closing, I found Michael sitting alone in the back office. The lights were dim, and a half-finished bottle of sparkling water sat beside a pile of receipts. His shoulders looked heavy, weighed down by something deeper than work. "You should be home," I said softly, stepping into the room. He smiled faintly without looking up. "So should you." I could say I was checking the ovens, I teased gently, but that would be a lie. He leaned back, exhaling. "It's been a long week." I sat across from him, folding my hands on the desk. "You've been carrying the whole place on your back, Michael. Maybe it's okay to let someone help once in a while." He glanced at me, his expression somewhere between gratitude and hesitation. "I'm not good at that. Asking for help." "I noticed," I said, and that made him laugh quietly. There was a silence then, not uncomfortable, but thick with things neither of us dared to say. Outside, the rain had started, soft at first, tapping gently against the windows. The sound filled the space between our words. He looked at me for a long moment. "You know," he said finally, "when I asked you to dinner that night, I told myself it was just to thank you. But it wasn't just that. I think I wanted to see if someone like you could remind me what it feels like to enjoy something again." His words caught me off guard. They weren't heavy with emotion, but honest, the kind of honesty that leaves no room for pretending. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "You don't have to," he said. "Just, thank you for not walking away." I didn't realize until then how much that meant to me, being needed not for my work, not for what I could fix, but simply for being there that night. We left together. The rain had grown heavier, blurring the city lights into soft streaks of gold and red. We stood beneath the awning, neither of us in a hurry to leave. "I'll walk you to your car," he said. We didn't speak as we walked. The rain glistened on the pavement, and our footsteps echoed softly. When we reached my car, I turned to him, wanting to say something, anything that would match what I felt inside, but the words wouldn't come. He broke the silence first. "You make the days easier," he said quietly. And I didn't think anyone could do that anymore. I smiled, though my eyes stung a little. "You make the kitchen feel alive again. That's something too." He nodded, his eyes holding mine for a moment longer than usual. Then he stepped back. "Drive safe," he said. I watched him disappear into the misty night, the sound of the rain growing louder. I sat in my car for a few minutes, my hands resting on the steering wheel, thinking about how quietly someone can enter your life and start changing the shape of your days. Over the next week, something between us deepened, though nothing outwardly changed. There was still the same rhythm of work, the same unspoken respect. But I began to understand his silences, how they weren't distance, but thought. How sometimes, he said the most by saying nothing at all. Then one afternoon, as we were preparing for a private dinner event, he came over to my station. His usual calm was gone, his jaw was tight, his voice lower than usual. "We might lose the restaurant," he said quietly, glancing toward the empty dining area. "The investors are pulling back." I froze. "Michael, I didn't know. I didn't want to worry anyone," he said. "But it's getting harder to hide." There was pain in his eyes, not pride, not fear exactly, but the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting too long alone. I wanted to reach out, to tell him it would be okay, but I also knew he didn't need comfort. He needed someone to believe in him. "Then we'll fight for it," I said firmly. "You're not alone in this." He looked at me, really looked, and for the first time, I saw something break open in him, not weakness, but trust. The next few days were a blur of effort. We reworked menus, called suppliers, cut costs without cutting quality. The whole team felt the shift, the urgency. And through it all, Michael and I grew closer, not through words, but through the shared will to save something we both loved. One night, after a long shift, I found a small note on my station. In his handwriting, simple and steady, it read, "Thank you for being the calm in my storm." I stood there for a while, reading it over and over, realizing that sometimes the quietest connections are the strongest ones, but even then, I knew life has a way of testing what's real. And before long, the storm he had warned me about would arrive, harder than either of us expected. The storm arrived quietly, not with thunder, but with silence. It started when Michael stopped coming in early. Then he stopped staying late. The usual spark in his eyes when he talked about the menu, the new flavors, the endless pursuit of perfection, it all dimmed. At first, I told myself he was just tired. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The investors had officially pulled out. The restaurant, our restaurant, had weeks left before closing if nothing changed. The air in the kitchen grew heavier with each passing day. Even the smell of baked bread, usually my comfort, couldn't mask the uncertainty that hung around us. One afternoon, I found him sitting alone again, this time in the dining area, staring out the window at the empty street. His jacket was draped over the back of the chair, his hands clasped tightly together. "Michael," I said softly, walking over, "you can't keep doing this to yourself." He didn't look up right away. When he finally did, his voice was quiet but steady. "I thought I could fix it. I thought hard work was enough." "Sometimes it isn't," I said, sitting across from him. "Sometimes, things fall apart no matter how much we care." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "This place was my whole life. Every inch of it. I built it from nothing." "I know," I said. "But maybe it's time to stop seeing this place as the only thing that defines you." He met my eyes then, tired, but searching. "And what am I without it?" "You're still the man who makes people feel something through what he creates," I said quietly. "You're still the man who helped me believe in small joys again. You're still, you." He didn't answer. He just stared at me for a long time, and then, slowly, a faint smile touched his lips. Sad, but real. That evening, we stayed late, cleaning the kitchen together in silence. The hum of the refrigerators was the only sound. I could feel how much he was trying to hold himself together. When we finished, I turned off the last light, and we stood there in the dark, side by side, listening to the soft tick of the cooling ovens. "Do you ever wonder," he said after a while, "why people come into our lives when they do?" "All the time," I replied. "I think you came into mine to remind me that there's life outside of these walls," he said. "That I'm allowed to feel something again even if it's fleeting." I felt a lump rise in my throat. "It doesn't have to be fleeting, Michael." He looked at me, really looked, and for a moment, I thought he might say something, but instead, he just nodded. "Maybe," he whispered. A week later, the decision was final. The restaurant would close at the end of the month. When he told the staff, his voice didn't tremble, but his eyes gave him away. Everyone clapped for him anyway, out of respect. For what he'd built. For who he was. After the announcement, people lingered longer than usual. They shared stories, laughter, even tears. It was strange. Endings can bring people closer in ways beginnings never do. When the night was over and everyone had gone, I found him in the kitchen, standing in front of the ovens, one last loaf baking inside. "Couldn't end without bread," he said softly. I smiled. "Of course not." We waited together until the timer went off. The smell filled the air, warm, familiar, comforting. When he took the loaf out, he handed me half. "Take it home," he said. "Bread is meant to be shared." I wanted to say something, to tell him that this wasn't really an ending, that maybe it was just a change of direction, but words felt small compared to the moment. So instead, I just nodded and whispered, "Thank you, for everything." He gave a small smile. "No," he said, "thank you for reminding me what everything really means." That night, as I drove home, the streets glistened from the rain that had fallen earlier. I rolled down the window slightly, letting the cool air fill the car. The bread rested on the seat beside me, still warm, filling the space with its scent, the scent of comfort, memory, and quiet resilience. I thought about how life surprises us. How someone can enter our world unexpectedly and change it without meaning to. Michael didn't rescue me from anything, and I didn't save him either. We just found each other at the right time, two tired souls who needed to be reminded that connection still exists, even when everything else fades. Weeks passed. The restaurant lights went dark for the last time. People moved on, as people always do. But sometimes, I'd open my cupboard and see that small jar of honey he'd given me months ago, still half full. I never used it up completely. Maybe because some part of me wanted to keep a piece of that chapter alive, a reminder of something real, something honest, something that didn't end with loss, but with quiet gratitude. And every now and then, when I bake, I still hear his voice in my memory, calm, steady, and warm. You make the kitchen feel alive again. And I smile, knowing that in some way, we both did that for each other. It wasn't love in the ordinary sense. It was something gentler, deeper, a meeting of two lives that touched just long enough to leave a mark neither of us would ever forget. Because sometimes, the most unexpected invitations, a simple dinner, a quiet walk, a shared moment, become the stories that stay with you for a lifetime.